Whoa, 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 let me make sure I have everything first. Sunglasses check, hat check, Pepsi check, vape check, notes check, thick skin check, and sources check. Man, let's go. Welcome back to Golden Bluted, everybody. If you're a college football fan, you already know what to do. Hit the like and subscribe button because that's all we do here. Golden Bluted is still rolling well past 9,000 subscribers, but we have a goal of 10,000 subscribers by the kickoff of the Backyard Brawl. That is September 1st. I know we can do it, but we can't do it without you hitting the subscribe button. Yesterday, I did a video about the SEC and the ACC swapping teams because, number one, they're both under the ESPN TV market. And I think it would be in the best interest of ESPN to strengthen the SEC as much as possible without losing the ACC. The biggest complaint that I got was I sent Auburn to the ACC and brought in Florida State. I stand by my Florida State pick, so instead of sending Auburn to the ACC, I decided to send Missouri to the ACC. I think Auburn's brand is more valuable than Missouri's. I was more worried about the SEC losing a footprint in the state of Missouri, but I agree with my subscribers and my viewers. Missouri would be a better swap to the ACC over Auburn. So there you go. I heard, I listened, I fixed it. Now on to today. Yeah, I did not put that to bed just yet. We're going to move on to the Big X and the Big XII. Once again, this is under the fact that both of these conferences are under the same umbrella, Fox. So it would be easier for these two conferences to swap teams instead of, say, the Big X, the SEC, or the Big XII and the SEC. You get the picture. And with this scenario, we don't have the ACC grant of rights, the brick wall that everything gets thrown against whenever we try to put teams in the ACC or take teams out of the ACC. So this one could actually be more doable. So right now with the additions of USC and UCLA, the Big X looks like this. Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, Northwestern, USC, and UCLA. That's a great looking conference, by the way. But could it look just a little bit better if they swapped some teams out and brought some teams in from the Big 12? In other words, without inflating the numbers, just getting the best brands. I think there is a way. Now here's what the Big 12 looks like, excluding Oklahoma and Texas and counting Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. Oklahoma State, Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas State, West Virginia, TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. Who are the teams that I swapped out of the Big 10 and who are the teams that I brought in from the Big 12 to replace those teams? And what does the Big 10 and the Big 12 look like afterwards? I actually like the results of this one better than the results of the SEC and the ACC swap. I think this went a lot better and I think it makes a lot more sense. So the first swap, and this one actually brings a smile to my face because it actually is a jab at one of our rivals. I'm talking about West Virginia. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to take Maryland out of the Big 10 and swap in West Virginia. West Virginia is by far the better brand. Yes, you're losing a footprint in the state of Maryland, but not many people care about Maryland football in the state of Maryland. And you're gaining a footprint in the state of West Virginia. And pretty much everybody in the state of West Virginia cares about West Virginia football. Plus, you're picking up more viewers from the Pitt market and more viewers from the Washington, D.C. market. West Virginia has a very, very strong presence in both of those cities. And I know, West Virginia wouldn't fit in culturally or academically in the Big Ten. I understand that, and I actually agree with you. This is just all about brand. I think if you take out Maryland and put in West Virginia, you're adding a stronger brand, and I think West Virginia is the much stronger brand over Maryland. The next swap, you know it's coming. Rutgers, I'm going to swap you out of the Big 10 and put you in the Big 12, and I'm going to bring in Oklahoma State. Very, very strong brand. A lot of people in the state of Oklahoma care about the Cowboys. Now, Oklahoma is the biggest brand, but they're in the SEC, so they're off the board. Next best thing, Oklahoma State. Nice footprint in a football state. The state of Oklahoma, definitely a college football state. They're a big brand. The fans care. Oklahoma State would bring in a lot of money to the Big Ten, especially over Rutgers. A lot more money than what Rutgers is bringing you in football. I think there's a lot of good matchups within the Big Ten if you bring in Oklahoma State, and it makes sense with Nebraska. This one I really, really like. The next swap I would do is Indiana out into the Big 12 and Baylor in. Finally, the Big Ten with a Texas footprint. That makes a lot of sense. I know, Baylor's a religious school. Not sure if they would fit in academically and culturally, which, by the way, Oklahoma State would definitely fit in the Big Ten, both academically and culturally. So that's an even bigger nod for Oklahoma State into the Big Ten. But for Baylor, it's a little bit different of a situation, but that's okay. Baylor's a great brand. In fact, right now, it's at an all-time high. If you were to grab Baylor, right now, this moment in time is the best time to pick Baylor. Baylor just won the national championship in basketball a couple years ago, and they just won the Big 12 last year. Great brand. Their fan base is growing by leaps and bounds right now, and you'd have a nice footprint in the state of Texas. Finally, the last swap. I would take Northwestern out of the Big Ten and bring in Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a bigger fan base and a bigger brand than you realize. And it's kind of bridging that gap between USC and UCLA and the rest of the Big Ten even more so. So you'd have UCLA, USC, and then Texas Tech, then Oklahoma State, then Nebraska, and then the rest of the Big Ten. So you'd have a nice bridge and still be coast to coast. I think it makes perfect sense. I think Texas Tech would make a lot of money for the Big Ten, and I do think Texas Tech would fit in academically and culturally in the Big Ten. Texas Tech is the number 2 largest fan base in the Big 12. West Virginia is actually number 1, so don't forget about that as far as adding West Virginia. And Oklahoma State's number 3. So you'd be getting the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 fan bases with West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State. And then there's Baylor. Their brand is at an all-time high. Their fan base, not the biggest, but it does add something, and it's a footprint in the state of Texas, and it helps bridge that gap even more from USC and UCLA to the rest of the Big Ten. So with these swaps, here's what the Big Ten and the Big 12 would look like afterwards. For the Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, Texas Tech, USC, and UCLA. And here's what the Big 12 would look like. Rutgers, Indiana, Iowa State, Kansas State, Maryland, TCU, Northwestern, Kansas, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. So yes, this is kind of taking away a little bit of the strength of the Big 12, but you're still keeping it intact so it could still make money for Fox, and you're definitely strengthening the Big 10 so that can make even more money for Fox. I like how the Big 10 looks, and I'm actually okay with how the Big 12 looks. I think in this situation, the Big 12 would turn into even more of a basketball league, which that's okay. And one of the things that I really liked about this swap is I did take out Northwestern for Texas Tech, but I kept in Illinois. So the Big Ten doesn't lose a footprint in the state of Illinois. You still get that Chicago area. So I think that's a good swap for the Big Ten right there. Same thing for Indiana. Yes, I swapped out Indiana for Baylor, but I kept in Purdue. And in football, Purdue is the bigger brand. I know in basketball, Indiana's the bigger brand, but that fits into the Big 12 even more. I talked about the Big 12 being an even bigger basketball conference with these swaps. So I think these would be the smart swaps if this were to happen. And FYI, understand what I'm about to tell you right now. This is not going to happen. I am not predicting a swap. This is not a prediction. That's not what this is. I'm just saying if ESPN or Fox decided, hey, let's strengthen one of these conferences, but still keep the other conference intact, this is how I think they would do it. Swap some teams. That way you're not over-inflating and you're getting just the best brands. But do I think this is going to happen? Absolutely not. So just like the SEC and the ACC swap, let me know in the comments which swaps I got right and which swaps I got wrong. And for the swaps that I got wrong, which swaps would you do? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.